All right, so remember this morning I was talking about working across boundaries, and this is one of our, well, this afternoon we're actually going to have two panels on two topics that are two of our favorite working across boundaries topics, with some really, really great folks on both panels. The first one this afternoon is Changing World of Work and Its Impact on Education. And this will focus on the whole dynamic between how education is evolving to hopefully better serve the needs of students as they move out and form careers and so forth. We're very fortunate to have our moderator here is Ryan Davis. He's the president and CEO of the Corporation for a Skilled Workforce, which is a nonprofit policy institute catalyzing transformative change in education, economic and workforce development through research and action. Please welcome Ryan Davis.
Good deal. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I love the fact that I see some friendly faces from our IMS Global Summit in Phoenix a few months ago around digital badging. So CSW has just celebrated its 27th year, which for a nonprofit policy institute is pretty good, and I can take responsibility for a little less than 27 weeks of that. So I have been on the job for about 4.5 months now, and it's been an absolute whirlwind, but it's been an absolute pleasure, particularly being able to attend events like this and see all of the innovation going on. So talking today, we have a wonderful panel with a huge amount of experience and a diverse amount of experience and different perspectives. But when we talk about the changing world of work, we know that we often go right to technology, that technology is driving all of the changes. But behind all of that is the impact on the people. So at CSW, we have future of work initiatives going on in several areas. We're looking at the changing world of retail, and about how a lot of times those first jobs that people are getting are going away and being automated, but yet the level of competency that is required by people that are working in experiential retail continues to go up. We're doing a project in Washington State about how drones are going to be impacting the rural economy in Eastern Washington. And then we're working with cities as new industries come in and old industries go away, talking about how we can be able to retrain the workforce to be able to do that. And all of those instances present challenges, and all of those instances present opportunities for education and industry to be able to collaborate. So our panel today, we're going to be able to talk about how that changing world of work is going to happen, and what are some of the barriers, and then what are some of the opportunities going forward. So I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and Derrick, if you can go ahead and get started.
I'd be glad to. I'm Derrick Edwards. I'm the president and CTO of AGS Data Systems. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Our organization has worked with workforce boards for 20-odd years, helping manage training and educational systems and programs. I am also personally involved on the educational side in that I am the chair for the State of Wisconsin Applied Computing Advisory Board, looking at lifelong learning and curriculum relevancy. And at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, we are also working on a program now that we refer to as a hybrid learning experience, where we are attempting to develop a pilot that allows universities to partner directly with industry in order to develop program-based opportunities, project and research-based opportunities for students to try to blend that process in this curated educational and industry collaboration, so that we can begin to remove the barriers between education and industry and try to make that more of a seamless blended experience for the student. So we get a chance to see this, I get a chance to see this from both sides, and again, I appreciate the opportunity of being here.
Great, thank you, Derrick. Diana?
Diana Oblinger. I'm the president emeritus, former president of EDUCAUSE. Most of you probably know EDUCAUSE as a nonprofit that supports the advancement of higher education through information technology. Other credentials that you may be interested in is way back around 2000, wrote a book with an IBM colleague called What Business Wants from Higher Education. So actually taking a look at what happens in the world of work and how you develop education credentials is something that I've been interested in for a long time. Having been a faculty member and an academic dean, I worked on the curriculum side of it and as an employer on the other side.
Okay. Donna?
I'm Donna Walker. I'm the Director of IBM Training and Skills. Glad to have a former colleague here with me. Most of you know IBM as a 70 billion technology company focused on cloud and cognitive computing. We have over 380,000 people worldwide, and when you look at the rate and pace of technology, training and credentials and skills is a key element of all of our strategic imperatives.
Great. Sean Gallagher. I lead Northeastern University's Center for the Future of Higher Education and Talent Strategy. My academic research focuses on the intersection of higher education and the world of hiring and learning and development. In particular, looking at what's happening with employers and bringing the voice of the employer, tracking changes in the job market, hiring practices, et cetera, into the higher ed community. And I think we're doing some interesting things both from the practitioner side in terms of some of our partnerships and credentialing innovations, as well as more traditional research aimed at developing insights.
All right. Well, thank you all. And I realize as we all met that there are 3 names with the letter D, so the odds are in the next 40 minutes I'm going to screw up one of those names, most likely. So, so moving into to our questions to spur some conversation. So we hear often that industry and education failed to communicate effectively. From your perspective, what are some of the specific barriers to communication? And Diana, since you wrote the book on this, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Sure. Let me give you 3 points that I think are probably important to consider. One is that in higher education, I think a lot of times when we think about interacting with employers, it's an advisory board. It's every year, maybe every 6 months. You simply don't have enough interaction to really understand what's going on with the other party. So I think one of the reasons we fail to communicate is because we don't spend enough time together and enough quality time really understanding each other's business. I think a second thing to think about in terms of the communication is whether we even ask the right questions. I know in a lot of settings, I've heard people say, well, you know, from a corporate perspective, what do you want us to teach? Well, that's probably not the right kind of question. It's more, what do you need people to do? How do you develop those kinds of skills and competencies? And then from the academic side, figuring out how you put the program pieces together, but not asking for the ultimate answer, but asking for something that allows you then to derive the answer. And I think one of the symptoms of that is many times we ask for the input. What do you want me to teach? Rather than the outcome. What do you want the student to be able to do? And then I guess the third thing I would mention is many times we just talk in high-level terms. What about the data? Employers are collecting a lot of data on who's successful, quality of hire analysis, those kinds of things. So let's not just talk in generalities, let's talk with data.
Yeah. So Sean, since you really work at that nexus a little bit, anything you want to add to what Diana said, or?
Sure, yeah, I'd follow up on a point Diana made, which is if you think about on both sides, the college and university side and the employer side, there isn't necessarily a function or an individual that's devoted to being the liaison that really has this focus. And I wonder if we'll see in the next few years the emergence of new kinds of corporate roles and new kinds of university roles. So for example, consider that among employers, the person that colleges might concern themselves with might be the college recruiting lead, which is often not to say there aren't senior people focused on that, but maybe a junior person who goes out and tries to recruit a class of traditional 18 to 22-year-old graduates from a campus. And then on the university side, for those at colleges and universities, maybe it's the advancement office or the president's office, individual faculty, individual departments, the research unit. So on both sides, it's really fragmented, and therefore that makes it really hard to coordinate in a meaningful way when you have those silos.
great. And Donna, so it seems like your role on the corporate side might actually starting to get into a little bit of that focus. If you want to share a little bit from your perspective at IBM.
Yeah, I would say what, Diana was on point in not what do we want you to teach, it's, what do we need the students coming out of university to know. And technology is such a dynamic area. It's changing so rapidly that the jobs that people will be taking in 2 years, the college sophomore doesn't even know what they are yet. So I think it's a lot of dialogue between universities and corporate, and then teaching those skill sets around problem solving and communications, and also adopting some of the newer technologies and being aware of what those newer technologies are.
And Derrick, since you've got kind of two hats that you're looking here, do you have an example of a particular breakdown in communication that you've seen between the industry side and the university side?
I'm sorry to say that I do. We recently held a meeting of the state of Wisconsin's 60 Forward initiative, where we are trying to get essentially everyone in the workforce statewide to hold a degree, a certificate, a license, or certification of some sort. And it's very interesting in our state because the heads of the 4-year system, the 2-year system, public systems, and the 2-year private system have all come together and signed an MOU. And this is a collaborative, synchronized, coordinated initiative. One of the individuals, we had a panel discussion there with industry representatives, and one of the senior individuals from the 4-year system said, what we really need from industry is a better understanding of where your business is going to be 5 to 6 years from now so we can prepare for that. And everyone from the educational side of the house was, yes, we need to know that. And everyone from the industrial side of the house was, you have got to be kidding me. We have to not just reduce, but really crush the cycle times on the educational side so that we can move education, and the STEM environment's my particular wheelhouse. This may not be as applicable in other areas, but make sure that if education is going to be a partner with industry, that those cycle times are sufficiently well reduced that we can keep relevancy on the educational side. And I think the complete disconnect over cycle time is one of the fundamental sources of miscommunication.
Okay, great. So our next question is thinking, sometimes we get really focused in our thinking, and it's hard to really see the entire picture. And so what are some of the mental traps that come up when we think of higher ed, and how can we avoid these to improve outcomes for both our students and employers as well? And Sean, I'm going to go to the end of the table and start with you on this one.
Well, in terms of the outcomes, I think we'll see a renewed focus on competency-based education, competency-oriented education. And I know IMS, through the badging standard and other standards, is working on this, where, to Diana's point, the more data we have, the more specificity, the better documentation of outcomes, I think the better for all parties. Right now, employers are largely still making decisions based on degrees, which are very blunt. I think they'll continue to do so. There are many reasons that degrees will be valued. It's not they're going to be displaced overnight by a digital badge. But I think we'll see the concept of badging and what's happening in adult learning with these micro-credentials and little digital documents that capture what skills you have and also what you can do. That will begin to be woven into potentially traditional degrees and traditional on-campus undergraduate offerings, and ideally an ecosystem where it'll develop around this data so that there can be a better translation.
Okay. And Donna, do you want to speak a little bit about IBM's hiring strategy with respect to degrees and how that's changed a little bit?
I think overall, degrees are still valuable. I mean, they do represent a body of knowledge, and our higher education system is still it's kind of the proving ground where we pull people from. What we have actually found, though, is if you look at the market today, there are so many jobs out there that don't require a 4-year degree. And IBM has been at the forefront of what we call P-Tech. It's a 6-year campus, high school campus. We work in conjunction with school districts, community colleges, government, and then industry sponsors that provide mentorship to build out a curriculum that takes students from 9th grade through an associate's degree. And so by doing this, we're actually, and we actually target an underserved market, so we're actually opening up the aperture to a whole population of students that may not have gone into technology to begin with. But after that associate's degree, yes, they can get an entry-level job, but there's an add-on there, and this is where universities can actually really step in and figure out, how do I now take this population of people who have a 2-year associate's degree, but they want to go on and they want to get the next level. I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Great. And Diana, any other comments on this topic?
I want to echo what Sean said about competencies. I think one of the traps we fall into is thinking about credits rather than competencies, and they're measured in different ways, and I think they have a different kind of transferability in the marketplace. Another trap that I think it's very easy for us to fall into is when we think about what people need to know, we translate that into courses. And courses are these massive blocks of material that typically take an awful long time to convey. And if things are changing as rapidly as they are in the workplace, and there's so many things that you need to know, you simply don't have time for all of these 2 and 3 credit blocks. So rather than thinking about courses, some people are beginning to think about threads. So it's not, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it's strings of things that go together. So if you want to do more, you want to do it in a different way, you've got to structure it in a different way. Along with that, I think there's a change in not just thinking about courses but threads, but how do you assess, or how do you help people develop? And we've been so used to testing people. Some people are now experimenting with developing their students using coaching, helping pull questions out of people. What do you need to know? How did you feel about that? That actually is a more effective way of developing those kinds of competencies over time. And then I think the other trap that everyone would probably agree with, but we fall into all the time, is something that Sean has written about. We assume that it's education once, that most of the people we are educating are first-time graduates rather than people coming and cycling through over a lifetime. So those would be a few mental traps.
Okay, great. So that's actually, you teed up our next question very well in talking about some of the innovations. So what are some ways that higher ed can evolve to enhance industry-based education initiatives and better partner to meet some of those workforce challenges? And Derrick, as a representative of a partnership, do you want to start us off?
There are a lot of different ways. One of the things that we're trying to focus on in our environment is looking at credentialing, instructional credentialing of industry experts. Traditionally, higher learning councils will say that if you're going to teach an undergraduate level, you have to have at least a master's. If you're going to teach at a master's level, you have to have a PhD. Despite the fact that almost nationwide there is no requirement that you have a teaching background, only that you have the degree in order to then go and do that. We see that there is a huge opportunity to reach out to industry, industry experts in the fields that we're teaching, not just being willing to do it, but being desirous of coming onto campus and assisting with that instructional process. This does not mean that we simply need a blended cadre of educators, and the standards that we have for the educational system need to go out the window. It may not be a process of replacing instructors in a classroom with industry experts, but leveraging industry experts to take load off of those instructors so that they can then teach additional classes with the time that they have. What we're trying to do is respect and maintain that fundamental understanding that, especially at the 4-year system, especially at the undergraduate level, that the universities are teaching a very narrow but deep perspective on a particular career pathway. Industry has a much broader view of that technology, and rather than saying one or the other, we're trying to find ways to marry those two together so that we can have that deep perspective at the university level coupled with that broader, rapidly evolving view that industry has by bringing these two groups together. So again, we say it's not one or the other, it's the marriage of the two that we think is really going to be most effective.
Okay, great. And Sean, anything that Northeastern's done that's particularly innovative in collaborating with industry?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say, Derrick's point made me think about what we're doing with GE, General Electric. My colleague Kemi Jonas in the audience here has been leading this, where mentors and leaders on the shop floor at GE are integrated in the mix alongside Northeastern faculty, or there's ways that you can, appoint people from industry as faculty, and this idea of blurring, not blurring scholarship and practice, but the boundaries between the academic work and the real world work. So experiential learning, providing credit for work-based experiences and content that's been developed by companies like IBM. We have a partnership with IBM as well to recognize their digital badges for credit in our graduate programs. And I'm aware of many partnerships in similar directions with other organizations where I think that's the new world that we're entering, where increasingly we will have ways to have employers in key areas be the providers of education alongside educational institutions, and then translate that into academic credit.
All right, wonderful. And Donna, so since IBM got called out as an example, I'll let you chime in next.
I think what we're doing with Northeastern is kind of groundbreaking here, where Northeastern is actually accepting IBM badges as prior learning credits. Because from a university standpoint, you don't have to do it all by yourself. I mean, we have very distinct needs for skills in the market, and much of those are in new technologies that universities haven't had the time to develop a curriculum for. And we're more than happy to partner with universities because it serves our purpose to grow the skills, but it also allows you to have the cutting edge technology and courses that your students can find very valuable. I would say one other area too, to enhance industry-based is the lifelong learning concept. And I know we'll probably talk about that more, but university shouldn't end at 4 years. I got my degree 30 years ago, and I would love to be able to go back and to continue to get updates from my university. I'm a very proud alum of the University of Texas, and if that was offered to me, it would be, I would be a lifelong customer to the University of Texas. I still am from a football standpoint.
Well, I could never be a customer of the University of Texas. I grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, so we have some rivalries going on. But interestingly on there, Georgia Tech just released a report. It was their vision for 2040, and a lot of the things that are being talked about in the panel have been incorporated into that report. While the core university is important, the residential experience is important, they're realizing that as a university, the responsibility to their alumni is to provide that lifelong learning piece and do it not just on a place-based basis, but leveraging technology to be able to do some of those pieces. So a lot of folks are kind of getting on there. Diane, oh, absolutely. I was going to pass it to you next.
I want to take us outside of the United States for just a moment.
Yeah.
And I know that IMS is a global audience. And some of you may know more about this than I do, but I've been very impressed, for example, with what Germany does with their colleges of applied sciences. And a couple things that I would point out, again, some of you may know much more than I do. The people who teach in those programs don't just have university educations, they also have to have completed a certain number of years, many times 5 as mentioned, as being a professional in an industry. They're not looked to produce research, they're supposed to be excellent teachers and be outstanding professionals in their field. And they have to rotate back to industry every several years, and they're subsidized to do that. They get to keep what they earn in consulting for that, so that keeps them very vibrant. The students in those systems rotate through 6 different internships over a period of their education. Those are relatively short internships, but then they have sort of a capstone experience that's a thesis they do at the end of their bachelor's degree. And one of the things that's been very interesting as the students are placed in industry and come back is they marry both the academic knowledge as well as the practical experience and see the relevance of what they're learning in the classroom in an industry space. And a colleague of mine from Germany has actually done some of the studies, and they have tracked. Their students have actually come up with many of the things that we talk about now, like smart factories that can reconfigure themselves. Those were developed by students in partnership when they were doing their internships in industry, years before it came up through university education programs. So we might ought to look at some pre-existing programs, look at some of the strengths, and think about how we develop alternative strands rather than just trying to create from new.
Right, excellent. So a couple of folks have already touched on lifelong learning and how essential that is in the modern economy. You're not getting your degree, going into the workforce, and then you're done. The learning is absolutely essential. So I want to throw about how all of our panelists, organizations promote learning within your own workforce or potentially within your client's workforce, and how higher education partners can better support some of those efforts. So Donna, I'm going to like to start with you because IBM's got the, I think probably the gold standard right now in terms of companies that provide lifelong learning.
Right. Our CEO, Jenny Rometty, is a very big advocate of learning. Within IBM, we are all expected to get 40 hours of learning each year. It's actually part of our annual review is, our skills and what are we doing to maintain our skills. We have a very robust internal HR program to develop training, and we have actually rolled out the digital badge program to be able to recognize people on the training and the skills that they achieve, and then actually help progress them. So from a digital badge program, I know that's where we're really hear about digital credentials. That all started as a way to identify where we have skills, where we have gaps. But what we have found is it has been an amazing way to progress people in their skills and to get them motivated to learn more.
Okay, great. And Sean, you talked about the partnership a little bit earlier with IBM being able to give credit for some of those pieces. Are there any other things that from your perspective, higher ed needs to be doing to better facilitate lifelong learning going between the two silos or organizations?
Yeah, probably more what's classically been considered prior learning assessment. There's a crossover there with competency-based education. The traditional college business model is pretty reliant on tuition at most institutions. That's certainly been a barrier for many institutions in terms of saying, well, we're going to accept these credits from the outside. Also, maybe even more significant than that is the quality concern. Oh, we didn't teach it here. It wasn't our faculty that developed this course. So I think technology will play a way in breaking down some of those barriers as we have more transparency, partly too. We're in a new era of transparency. Whether it's Rate My Professors or LinkedIn or Yelp, Amazon, the world that we live in, the quality of courses I think will be increasingly evident and available. And presumably colleges will no longer be able to say, well, we think our Econ 101 class is better than the one over there, or we're not going to accept it from that community college.
Got it.
And it applies to workforce as well.
Yeah. So Derrick, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit on this one, just because the conversation we were having last night about how one of the differentiators for AGS is that you provide unlimited education about your systems to your clients. Do you see an opportunity like that to be able to leverage something that somebody's learning from an external partner, that there are skills that somebody could take into the higher ed world to be able to advance their careers and opportunities?
I'd prefer to answer a completely different question if you
Go
have
for
one
it.
available.
All right.
Well, I do want to answer something slightly different as a follow-on to this. One of the things we're also doing in the state of Wisconsin is looking at career changers and trying to develop at the 2- and 4-year system a better understanding of not just the undergraduate experience, but also this lifelong learning process, not just to accept that people will come back into the university system, but to attempt to streamline that process and align the 2- and the 4-year systems for grade and course and credit portability. And I think that that is one of the really the most important things that universities and 2-year systems can look at. It's not just a matter of, well, if people come back, we'll be willing to help them. But how do you change your conceptualization of the audience that you're dealing with, the audience that you're serving, so that it really does have a lifelong perspective to it, not just waiting on corporations to say, we require this, would you be willing to take our money in order to teach our people? Of course you would. But how are you going to make that easy for organizations like IBM? How are you going to reach out to them? How are you going to manage those programs and those curricula in order to smooth that process and accommodate the working career changer? And as we've mentioned here before, just dropping them back into another 15-week-long semester or 3 or 4 credit hour program is a very ill fit for career changers.
So our last question is talking about emerging technologies, right? We've got a lot of people here excited about being able to leverage technologies to be able to address some of these problems. So what are some of these emerging tech that you get excited about in the future of education and industry collaboration from K-12, as Derrick set us up for, all the way up to PhD level? And Diana, we'll start with you.
Oh, all right. So one of the technologies that I am excited about is looking at what's happening with, you may call them talent management platforms. Sean just mentioned LinkedIn as an example. There are these massive platforms that we have today that are allowing us to have much greater transparency between people's skills and credentials, what's wanted in the labor market, where you can develop those skills, sort of how you develop a different kind of career path. And I think that transparency and that view forward into what you might be able to do next is absolutely transformative. I think a second technology that is really interesting is somewhat akin to that. And I think it's going to be a game changer because it changes the playing field on the hiring side. There are a lot of changes in human resource information systems, doing massive analytics using artificial intelligence. It's totally changing the experience of applicants. I mean, you can have a chatbot that answers your questions, tells you where you are in the application process, rather than it being the black hole that many times those of us who've been in the job market have experienced. But that gives you a lot more granularity. You begin to see a lot of things that are quite different. And the third technology that I think may be really fun to watch is what you can do with nudges, texting platforms. And I'll give you 2 quick examples where I think is making a potentially big difference. You're seeing it used in colleges and universities, of course, to keep people in the system, to get them from application to actual registration, so you don't lose them out of the system because they didn't complete materials, they didn't understand how to file financial aid, or to encourage them to take more credits. But on the workforce side, you're beginning to see these state longitudinal data systems, people be able to mine that data and understand who's out there that may have some credits but no degree, and reach out to them and say, well, here is where you can intersect, and sort of nudge them to knowing the right place to go, the right action to take to encourage them back into education. And I think those are 3 technologies that'll be a lot of fun to watch.
And I love that comment on the talent management system, because for all the advances in technology, most jobs are still applied for the same way in the 1950s, right? We have PDFs now instead of printing your resume on nice paper, but it's really a resume and a cover letter that is largely that, instead of mapping different competencies and that competency-based hiring for that. Don, anything you want to add to what Diana started?
Yeah, when you said artificial intelligence, it got me all excited. And as we see the digital footprint of skills expand through digital credentials, not only issued by industry, but also by universities and professional organizations, I think eventually we will see a flip of the job applicants aren't going to be coming to the hiring managers. The hiring managers are going to be finding the job applicants. Because now, through big data and through artificial intelligence, we can actually start finding those people that have the skills that map to the job description that we have. When we talk about gig economy, when we talk about, the rise of teams and having to build teams, it's having that data at our fingertips, which will allow us to build those perfect teams, that meet our needs.
Okay, great. Sean?
I think it's Second Life. Does anyone remember Second Life? No, it's a joke. Honestly, I think it might be MOOCs. The elements of massive open online course platforms that have the machine learning elements that are adaptive. I thought about it a little bit, and we're at a moment now where there are now 10 or 15 degrees that are available on a MOOC platform. It's early, but there are 10,000 students enrolled in those programs. They're generating hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue for prestigious institutions, University of London, University of Illinois, Georgia Tech. And so we're actually seeing this whole idea of bending the cost curve shift. And a lot of these programs are really job market oriented and skills based and very modular. So I don't know if you can call MOOCs a single technology, but I'm very closely watching those experiments and trying to understand, okay, if we can use AI and adaptive learning to deliver to more people at a lower cost, at scale, and in ways where there's this very large top of the funnel. People are coming in, they're doing free or low cost courses, they're doing micro credentials, they're paying $50 or $200, and then they can kind of stack and continue on to the degree. I think that will only lead to more degrees, growing demand for degrees, as well as the growth of this whole micro-credentialing marketplace that has a lot of promise.
All right. And Derrick, you want to close us out with the data scientist perspective?
Yes, I do, actually. So one particular technology, predictive analytics, being brought to the process, we have what I hope will be a very interesting project going on now, looking at persistence amongst the students. As this audience certainly knows, on a national basis in the US, we lose about 30% of the undergraduate population over their first summer. And even in STEM technologies on a national basis, we have only about a 54 to 55% persistence rate for what we would assume would be some of the more interesting, higher paid, higher opportunity jobs. So what we're doing is we've assembled a 10,000 student database. We have 309 attributes that we are looking at to try to better understand how to predict the non-persistence. And the research is beginning to show that nudges may be a thing that has been undervalued. We don't believe that it's really that I fail a class. But when you take an undergraduate into that new environment and they decide that they're going to be in their first serious relationship, they're going to learn to drink this year, they're going away from home. There are many, many things that feed into that. And we are looking for these cusp events through the SIS environment. We're a D2L institution, and see whether or not we can find ways of predicting that non-persistence. If we can increase the yield there, then we also have a tremendous uptick in the workforce that we're graduating and being able to supply. So the technology is there, the data sets are huge. Take advantage of that kind of thing and build the models to help you understand the student base.
All right. Well, please join me in a great round of applause for our wonderful panel and all the perspectives that were shared today. So because we have a panel coming right after us, we're not going to have time to take questions from the audience right here, but I believe that all of us, or at least the vast majority, will be at cocktail hour after this. So please come and find us, share a card, ask a question or something you weren't dying to ask. But one more time, a round of applause for our panel.